Hi guys, I'd like to welcome you guys all back to my channel, and today I'm doing my first YouTube review on a book, and that is on An American Marriage by Tayari Jones. First, I'd like to say, if you guys have not subscribed to my channel, please click the subscribe button down below and become a part of this family. And yeah, check out all my social medias and things. So I'm very excited about this particular video, and that is because I've never done a book review. I've reviewed makeup, I reviewed a couple of wigs, all that kind of stuff, but I've never reviewed a book. And I've decided that that's going to be something added to Melanin Eclectic, because some books are just so good or so bad to me that they deserve like a spotlight moment. And for this book, I am happy to do a review on because it was a pretty good love story. And for those of you who have not figured it out yet, or who have not even really watched any of my book videos, I am a serious skeptic with book love stories. I'm especially very skeptic about love triangles because I always feel like they're really, really forced, and it's like we don't need it. And it always adds an element to the story that always makes me feel like the female character is just a weak being. And it just really aggravates me because I'm like, you don't need love to be bad in a book. Like, let it go. But for this particular book, it actually shocked me. Oh, by the way, this review has spoilers. So if you don't want to be spoiled, I don't suggest that you keep going. I will say that I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. So there you go. Let's see. Where do I begin? Oh, the premise of this story is that there is a young married couple who have been married for about 1.5 years. Their names are Roy and Celestial. Roy and Celestial end up going to visit his parents for something, and while he is there, he is wrongfully accused of raping an old woman in the hotel that they were staying in, despite the fact that he was with Celestial the whole night. And being Louisiana, in this particular place, as a young black man, of course, they were not really susceptible to hear his truth, and he ended up being sentenced to 12 years in prison. So, while Celestial had to go back home in Atlanta, her husband was stuck in jail. And the way that Tayari does this book, she tells the story from their eyes. So, each chapter, essentially, is told by one person or the other. So it was told by Roy in the beginning, then it was told by Celestial, and the story continues to move through both of them until we hear the voice of Dre. Now, Andre is Celestial's childhood bestie who has clearly been in love with her his whole life. And that is where I was like, okay, obviously this is that cliche, I've loved you forever type thing. And I was beginning to be a skeptic. But the way that he was introduced into this story, you almost kind of feel bad for him. And I'll try to touch on that in a second. But I want to go back to specifically Roy. So while listening to this audiobook and reading the book, because I switched between them depending on whether I was reading or driving, Roy's voice from the audiobook was perfection because he's from Louisiana and he has that really thick accent, and they made sure that the person reading the story also had that thick accent, and it was great. But essentially, this story talks about how the mass incarceration of African American men destroy marriages and families. And it was done in such a way that you saw the impact of him being in prison by listening to what his family members were saying. And I'm not just saying like just his parents. I'm talking about her parents as well. Like everybody felt like he was wrong. Like the system did him wrong. Everybody felt like he didn't deserve what he got. And it's very true because he was actually very innocent, and he ended up getting released from jail after 5 years. But in 5 years, think about what that could do to a relationship. And I feel like Tayari Jones did a really good job of trying to emphasize that fact that like, even if he was innocent, even though he didn't do this, life went on without him. And for anybody to believe that life is going to stand still when your life is taken from you is not plausible, and in fact is not the way life works. So obviously at that point, you're feeling sorry for Roy. Like, I felt sorry for Roy most of the story because I was like, dang, like, he didn't do nothing to deserve this. And he's, like, trying to get by. And, like, his wife is, like, there but not there. And I was like, I found myself getting annoyed with Celestial because I felt like she was in this woe is me type situation. But then, like, it's turned over to Celestial. And it started showing how frustrating it is to be the wife of somebody who's incarcerated and all the things that you have to do just to be able to see her husband. Like, she'd have to drive overnight, get searched and all that craziness just to go in and see her husband. And they were having that typical, we just got married, that part of marriage where they say, like, you have to grow with each other. They hadn't even gotten to that point. And it was like, before she could even really enjoy her marriage, it was technically taken away from her. Like, legally she was still married, but really, like, her life was essentially in prison the same way that his was. And the part of Celestial that I sympathized with was the fact that she felt guilty about living her life. Like, she had started a business that her husband encouraged her to start, and it was flourishing the way that her husband had encouraged her to do it. He was the inspiration for it. So I could see how, like, that was like a continual guilt for her. But okay, so here's a major spoiler. Obviously, she ends up sleeping with her best friend while she's still married to Roy. But here's the part that really got me on that. They slept together on the night of Roy's mother's funeral. And she was drunk. He claims that he wasn't. And the part that really aggravated me about that was, like, Dre had just gone to jail to see Roy. And Roy had asked him to take his place in carrying his mother's casket because they would not give him permission to go to his mother's funeral. And Dre accepted. And I kind of feel like, in that regard, Dre was the villain. Like, I want to say that Celestial was too, but for that particular reason, I was so angry at Dre. Like, I was like, how could you do that? Like, you literally just saw this man, and this man literally told you, like, this is my wife, respect that. And you just selfishly just let that go. But then I'm like, wait, because Celestial was the one who initiated it. She's the married one. So then I was like, this hoe, like, ridiculous. I was so angry at the two of them. And I was like, yo, like, why would you do that? Like, that's committing adultery. I don't care that, he's in jail and that you're lonely and da 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 da. And, like, after she did it, then she wrote him that Dear John letter, essentially telling him, like, she can't do it anymore. And I would have respected her so much more if she would have written the letter before she did it. But then I think about it and I'm like, it's like I started seeing the humanity of the story and about how difficult it must have been to get to that point and just feel like such a terrible person and just feel like, like you're a terrible woman because you want to continue your life, but you feel like your life is stuck because your husband was wrongly accused of a crime. But does that mean that your life stops because his life stopped? And, like, I really felt like she did such a good job in, like, pulling me into the story and making me see it from all of their perspectives. There was even a point in time where I kind of felt bad for Dre. But honestly, when Dre got his butt kicked, I was like, you knew this was coming, bro. Like, your daddy told you it was coming. Her daddy told you it was coming. Like, that was disrespectful what you did to that man's wife. Like, you can't be his homeboy and then wanting his wife. It never goes together. Also, at first I was thinking like that's why men and women can't be home. That's why men and women can't be besties, because they always end up sleeping together. But what's revealed in the story is that they had already hooked up their senior year of high school. And so they had already had this connection that they just pretended wasn't there. And I'm like, I feel like if that information was known before Roy and Celestial got married, I don't think Roy would have went forward with the marriage. Because even when they argued, when he like left the room to like cool his head. He was like, I already know she in there calling Dre. I don't feel like he would have been comfortable with her calling his homeboy if he knew that his homeboy had already smashed. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know. I really enjoyed the way that she connected the three of these characters. And I really enjoyed the way that it really gave a very realistic moment of what happens when a man or when someone you love goes to prison. Like, it showed it from all spectrums. It showed everybody's hurt. It showed everybody's pain and everybody's like relief when he got released. But at the same time, it was like, oh my gosh. And then there comes a point where Roy gets out of prison and needs to go talk to Celestial, because even though she wrote him the Dear John letter, she never divorced him. And that part really angered me, because I was like, so girl, you just want to have your cake and eat it too. Like, that's trifling. Like, I found myself mad at Celestial. But then Roy makes me mad, because then he goes and sleeps with old girl and then it's like, I want you to know that you're special and that I wasn't just treating you like that because I got out of prison. And it's like, but that's what you did. Like, you also just committed adultery because you're still married and you claim you want to know if you're still married. Like, I was so done with the way that they handled their sexual whatevers we're going to call them. But as I am not a married woman and that is not something that I participate in, how am I going to call them out? I don't know what that's like. I don't know what that needs. That's not an area that I'm equipped to answer. So I could literally only go off of the way that it was presented in the book. And the way that it was presented in the book, it was like this, like, though he wanted to hold on, he was holding on to the wife that he had before he went to prison 5 years ago. He was not willing to accept her for the woman that she was at that point. And the woman that she was at that point had moved on without him. And that part of the book actually like broke my heart, because I was listening to it on the audiobook, and like even the person that was reading Roy's part sounded so hurt and so heartbroken. But Celestial also felt broken. And I feel like the way that she was like, this is partly her fault and that she wants to make sure he's okay. I don't know, I gained some respect back for her, because I'm like, dang, like, you just gonna drop that man? But it's obvious that she still cares about him, and it's obvious that he was still a person in her life that mattered to her, and she just could not figure out a good way to show that. And again, Tayari Jones did a really good job. I have never read anything from Tayari Jones. I posted this on my Snapchat, and a friend of mine responded back saying that she loved Tayari Jones and that she has Silver Sparrow. And I'm going to read Silver Sparrow. I don't know what it's about, but man, I was actually very impressed with the way that this story was written. I liked that it touched on, that was another thing. I liked how black it was. I can't think of another way to explain this. And by that, I mean, they went to Morehouse and Spelman, and they were young and they were educated and they had dreams and aspirations. And like, I felt like most of the time when I read books, even if the books are starring African-American characters, it's like, I could never really connect with them because they don't act, how I, like, these people were my age in this book. And I felt like I could, in the beginning, and I could connect with them because they were making comments about things, talking the way that I talk. Like, I don't know. It was nice where, like, they were talking about pledging. They were talking about the Divine Nine. They were talking about Georgia, and they were making connections to things that, like, I have done with my friends in Atlanta. Like, it was really nice. I don't know. I just really liked the book, and I felt like I needed to say some extra things about this book that were going to be entirely too long for my February reads. And if you didn't check that out, check that out up there. But I think I've been talking for like 15 minutes just on this book. So if you guys haven't checked it out, if you've been wondering if you should, it is a good read, and I recommend it highly. I just became a Tayari Jones fan. I've never ever read or heard of her books, but I'm so glad that I specifically started looking up African-American writers, and she deserves her own shout out. So again, thank you guys so much for checking out my channel, and until the next time, guys, Bye.